Everyone is talking about the importance of digital transformation these days, but how many organizations are ready to actually transform themselves? You can be ready for transformation if you can perform a self-assessment of where you are today and adhere to the 7 disciplines of digital fitness. Hi, I'm Stan Gibson, and I'll be your host and moderator for this on-demand webcast. Joining me to explore how you can achieve digital fitness through those 7 disciplines are 2 experts. Nigel Fenwick, Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Welcome, Nigel. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thanks.
And Eddie McDaid, Senior Vice President of Industry Solutions at Software AG. Welcome, Eddie. I'm glad you can be with us today.
Thank you very much, Stan. Very much looking forward to learning about Forrester's findings on the 7 disciplines of digital fitness.
Indeed, Forrester has conducted new research regarding the readiness of companies for digital transformation. So let's start by hearing about those findings from Nigel Fenwick. And then Eddie and I will discuss with Nigel just what those findings mean and what you can do about them.
Thanks, Dan, and it's great to be here to talk about this new research we've done into how companies can prepare themselves for digital transformation and, importantly, how to assess where they're at today. And we did this research to look at some of the disciplines that really help technology groups understand how to become a catalyst for digital transformation inside their enterprise. But when we talk about digital transformation, it's obviously difficult to understand what one company means compared to another. And what I find in all of my conversations with clients around transformation is it's important to sort of level set. What do we mean by digital transformation? So I want to just start with an exploration on what is happening that's causing companies to need to change, to transform. Now, we all know that most of us travel around with a smartphone in our pockets these days, and we have these new experiences. So, for example, I stayed at a hotel recently where I could open my hotel room door with my smartphone, and it allows me to not worry about demagnetizing my key. So one of the challenges you have is that all of these different experiences that we have in our daily lives, they change our expectations ever so slightly. They modify what we think is possible and what should be delivered and how it should be delivered. And those changing expectations slightly impact our future value perceptions. In other words, does this company give me the value I expect? And you can kind of think about this as a formula. So the formula that I have on the slide here is the perceived value that any individual has of a particular product or service or brand is a function of the experience that's delivered to the individual over the expectations that individual has of what the brand or the product or service can do to help them get to the outcome that they value or desire. And to the degree that the expectations that we have are being changed and reset on a continuous basis by these digital experiences we have all over the place, right? Not just in hotels, but how we shop, where we go for entertainment, what we do at work. All of these different experiences that we have change and reset our expectations. And the fact is that our expectations are being changed incredibly quickly these days. I don't know how often my apps update on my smartphone because they do it themselves, right? Those updates happen while I'm sleeping, while I'm working. They're constantly updating. And every so often I'll look at the smartphone and find a new feature that I couldn't do before, but now I can do, and that changes my expectation. And if you're a company that's designed to deliver products and services on a regular basis, your company structure is typically designed to not change that quickly. It's designed to evolve pretty slowly. And what's happening with these changing digital experiences is the need to change how you deliver experiences to customers has increased. The cadence has increased. Because if you don't continuously deliver that evolved experience, what happens is this equation goes out of balance. And in fact, the expectations go up, right? So if the denominator goes up, the perceived value goes down. And that's really a problem for most companies. The change, the transformation that we talk about is this transformation of the business to become incredibly fast, incredibly nimble, to respond to expectations of customers and to create new experiences of customers. And in fact, you can really think about this from a perspective of digital continuing to have this impact on every industry because these experiences change over time. They continuously evolve. And it's not just B2C, it's also B2B, right? So employees come into a B2B environment, say a manufacturing environment, and they bring their experiences with them, their personal consumer experiences. And then as they engage with vendors and suppliers, they expect those vendors and suppliers to be able to deliver equivalent experiences to them. So it's really important to understand this change that's happening, but then to understand, well, what are the things that we can do to help us get ready for the change and actually be more successful in going through the change. So to better understand that, we surveyed 223 IT decision makers to figure out what they're doing to help their companies prepare for this transformation, to actually succeed at this transformation. And so I'm going to highlight some of the key findings from this study and dig into some of the recommendations, and then we'll have a sort of discussion on the results. But one of the things we found that's really important to understand is that high growth organizations focus digital on creating customer value. So we found that when you look at the companies that are growing by more than 5%, either in their budgets from an IT perspective or revenue, right, by a significant amount, those companies significantly focus on creating new sources of value for customers out of digital. They're not just looking at how do we improve the efficiency of the business or how do we add just, say, a mobile app. They're fundamentally looking at developing a holistic strategy to create value for the customer. And that's very important. It's very telling, right? So it helps us understand these high-growth companies look at their digital experiences slightly differently to other organizations. And we found in the study that digital impacts almost every business capability. So one of the things we asked companies or executives in those companies is of these various things, which are more important than others, right? So what we found, for example, in the retail industry, we found that the ability to focus on regulatory compliance management for IT leaders is very high, right? That's one of the things that is critical to them. Rationalization and efficiency is very important in the retail industry. And these are sort of the top things. But if you look at the list of things that they look at and that are important to these IT leaders, it's actually a broad spectrum of things. It's not one thing over everything else. We have to do all of these things in order to be successful. And that's very important to understand. It's about being able to be high quality across a very broad range of capabilities in the organization. In retail banking, for example, we see the prioritization around optimizing branch communications and the partner ecosystems the bank has in order to be able to create value for the customer. And market growth is a high priority also for them. But again, you see there's a few at the top that have these slightly higher percentages, but it's a broad spectrum of things that these IT leaders are doing to be able to create value and transformational value for their organization. In manufacturing, we see this focus on digital customer experience, supply chain efficiency, and rationalization of systems, the top priorities. Now, from a point of view of understanding what's going on there, we can think about the shift in manufacturing to become more connected to their customer through digital, and also a continuous view on how do we optimize the supply chain. That's something that's been in manufacturing for many years. So there's sort of some new and some old blended in together at the top. But again, you see this broad spectrum of change that's required to help prepare for transformation. And also in government, when we looked at the government numbers, we see this broad spectrum, but there's a number in government that sort of stand out higher than others, right? So we have this increased openness, sort of the open government movement. And then, not surprisingly, a focus on operational efficiency. A lot of government organizations are obviously under tight budget pressure on a continuous basis. So how do we use technology to improve the efficiency of the organization? And then rationalization and consolidation of their systems becomes a core component of that. But there's still a broad spectrum involved in government circles in terms of the things that need to be done, the capabilities that IT needs to have, the expertise they need to be able to bring to the organization to help the organization through this transformation process. So the key findings we have are really around these 7 IT disciplines that correlate to not only high growth, but also better digital strategies, etc. So I'm going to just talk about these 7 disciplines and understand how they play into the messaging here. So first of all, when you think about these 7 disciplines, it's important to understand that what I have on the slide here is a comparison of those companies that have a full strategy in place, the darker blue line. They have a full strategy in place to show how they're going to transform the business, create new sources of value for the customer. The light blue line here highlights those companies that have more of what we call what I would call a bolt-on strategy. They have a limited strategy to add capabilities to the existing business model. And what we see here is that there's clearly, for those companies that have a full strategy in place, they're much more mature in their view of these disciplines. So transformation planning is a huge percentage difference between the two. Same with scalability of insights and data integration. And connectivity to partners, another one where there's a very big difference. Now, the other 3, there's still a difference, particularly real-time visibility and application and systems coordination, but it's not as big in terms of a data perspective as the other 4. And then the last one, data consistency, is the one that is consistent across both of those groups. Perhaps not surprising that IT groups all feel that they have to be consistent in data in order to be able to do anything these days. So there's definitely some very strong correlation between the organizations that have these really strong digital strategies to create value and drive revenue and their ability to be mature in these 7 disciplines of IT. We also find these 7 key disciplines correlate to fewer challenges with digital strategies. So, for example, when you compare the average number of challenges faced or anticipated by companies, and you look at the difference between the two, so the orange has an average of 4.7, the blue is an average of 5.8. Basically, what we're saying is the orange group here have 6 or more tactics that are very or critically important to them, and all the others are in the light blue category. And we can see that there's a significant difference in the number of challenges that are faced or anticipated by companies that are more mature across 6 or more of these disciplines. So what that tells us is that the maturity in the discipline helps to reduce the challenges faced by the IT organization. And so there's obviously a significant benefit there to be had. And we can get into the discussion about why that might be in the Q&A. But it's really important to understand there's a strong correlation here to the likelihood of reducing your challenges and the ability to move forward in doing digital transformation or enabling digital transformation in the organization. So what are some of the key findings? Well, first of all, the high-growth companies focus on transformation as a way of creating new sources of value, right? So 52% of organizations with strategies to create new sources of value are likely to have a high year-on-year growth. So a high-growth strategy tends to correlate very strongly to these more transformative, value-oriented strategies for customers. And just 25% of companies that have that sort of more bolt-on strategy see that high growth. So much higher correlation to growth with having these sort of disciplines in place and understanding strategy from a perspective of creating value for the customer. We also see the transformation strategy requires digital customer experience and digital operational excellence. So these two sides of the same coin, effectively. A lot of people think of digital transformation purely from the customer experience perspective. But all of the research that we've done to date highlights the need for creating digital operational excellence in order to be able to deliver world-class digital customer experience. So key initiatives are prioritized as part of digital strategies that empower customers and improve the operational agility of the organization. It's not one or the other, it's both. You have to be able to create these great customer experiences, but you also have to be able to use digital operational excellence to improve the operational agility of the organization. Now, if you think about it, that correlates to my very first point about that equation going out of balance. If your experiences are not keeping up with what the customer expects, then you're going to produce diminishing value to the customer, and therefore sales are going to go down. So the agility in the organization is needed to be able to deliver that evolving experience at the pace of the customer. And that does vary somewhat by industry. So high change industries like consumer-facing industries, retail, for example, hotels, travel, they all face this challenge of rapidly changing customer experiences. And so the business model has to be much more nimble than it has been in the past. We also see these 7 disciplines correlate to digital transformation, readiness, and growth. So if you think about the 7 disciplines that we have here and how they compare, the darker blue ring on the outside of each one of these graphics here represents companies that have 7 of these disciplines optimized. And then the lighter blue is 5 to 6 of these disciplines optimized, and the darker blue is 0 to 4 of those disciplines optimized. And so we can see, for example, the CEO setting a clear vision for digital in the organization correlates much more strongly to those companies that have 7 disciplines optimized. Same for having the right people. In fact, even a greater differentiation there, having the right people. If you have the 7 disciplines, you're much more likely to have the right people in place to define digital strategy. Very strong correlation there. Having the right people and skills to execute. Again, a very strong correlation to these 7 disciplines to be able to execute the digital strategy. Same with having the process, right? So do we have the processes we need to execute the strategy? You're much more likely to have those if you build these 7 disciplines in place. And culture, and the ability to understand the potential to change how we create value for our customers. And that ties back to being more strategic in your thinking of how you're going to apply digital. And then the final one there, correlating back to the increase in revenue, right? So if you've got those 7 disciplines optimized, you're more likely to be in that high growth and high budget change year over year. So very important to understand the 7 disciplines and understand how they can help you grow your business and get you to the next level of transformation for your organization.
Well, thank you very much, Nigel. As promised, it's time now for us to discuss how global IT leaders and you can manage digital transformation. To begin with, I'd like to really sort of go back to the beginning. Can we just start by recapping the definition of digital transformation? And Nigel, in your opinion, what is digital transformation? What is it not? And what are some of the challenges companies face?
Yeah, well, this is a question that comes up all the time, right? So, and it's usually characterized by sort of bolt-on versus transformation, which I mentioned earlier. So the distinction between a company that does bolt-on transformations or bolt-on digital, you're essentially adding digital elements to the existing business model, but you're not changing the business model from a point of view of how you drive revenue or how you create value for the customer. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, and it has some immediate benefit, right? So you can get some very quick wins by doing bolt-on digital to the existing business. And very often to get to transformation, you need to do a series of bolt-ons to build those digital capabilities in order to get to transformation. But I would characterize transformation as being the ability to create value in a different way for the customer. So you're looking at the relationship with the customer and the outcomes that you're trying to deliver to the customer, and you're using those emergent technologies to change the way you deliver that outcome to the customer, to change that value relationship with the customer. So the analogy I use is one that, if you think about a car, right? So I always use this sort of example of remembering when you wanted your first car. So as a teenage boy, I wanted a red Ferrari, but just could not afford one. I didn't have a trust fund. So what do? You go out and buy the beat-up old car that you can afford, and being a typical teenager, you go out and, you paint the Go Faster stripes on the car. Well, if you picture the car, that beat-up old car with Go Faster stripes on, it's still a beat-up old car, right? It doesn't make it a sports car. If you want to make it a sports car, you have to fundamentally transform the car. You've got to rip the engine out, replace it, replace the brakes, replace the wheels, replace the suspension. You've got to change possibly the aerodynamics. You may even want to give it a coat of paint. But at the end of the day, you have to radically change the car to make it a sports car. And it's very much the same with the organization. You can bolt those Go Faster stripes of digital onto the organization by creating a mobile app or a new website. But if you really want to transform the organization, you have to look at the business from the outside in, from the customer's perspective. What's the outcome the customer's trying to get? What do they perceive value as? And how do we actually change that value equation? How do we create more value for the customer than we currently do by adding new digital capabilities to help them get the outcome they value? That's inherently the difference between bolt-on and digital transformation.
Eddie, over to you. I'd like to ask you perhaps the same question. Maybe you could recap how you see the definition of digital transformation and maybe some of the challenges that you see companies facing.
Well, Nigel, I think you're absolutely right. It's much more than being a bolt-on. I mean, digital transformation is a dramatic thing. It's a change in state of an organization as it transitions from being, dare I say it, a conventional company to one where information technology and information is at the core of the business. And when this happens, we see that technology becomes an integral part of the company's strategy. We see that IT and the use of IT becomes much more analytical, driving insights about the business and into the business. We see that data becomes the lifeblood of the organization. And Nigel, as you said, we see customer value, new types of customer value, new business models, new types of digital products and digital services. And the interesting thing for me is that this transformation is enabled by technology, but it is much more than that. It is a change to the people, it's a change to the processes, the culture, and ultimately the identity of the organization. And so it's very interesting to see from your findings in the Forrester report, Nigel, this correlation between digital capability and digital competency to growth and also to readiness to adapt to the demands of digital transformation.
Yeah, and it's something that when you look at the technology, I mean, it's never just about the technology, right? It's not. The technology enables these new experiences, and the technology changes all the time. So one of the challenges that many organizations face is how do we build an architecture that's designed to constantly change, that's designed to evolve into something we don't know what it's going to be, right? We don't know what we're going to need in 12 months' time or 2 years' time. So we have to build an architecture that's designed to constantly change, and in order to be able to evolve those customer experiences and continuously create that value. And this is why technology, the technology architecture, the design, the platforms that are put in place become critical to being able to deliver that customer value. If you don't have those right components in place, you can't actually change fast enough. You can do it once, you can maybe do it twice, but you can't do it on a continuous basis. And that's one of the inherent challenges of being able to enable the transformation from a technology architecture perspective.
Yeah, I think you called it nicely there. This concept of built to change, it's one of the reasons we see people moving away now from packaged applications, because if the applications that you're using need to change all the time, then it's very difficult to do that with packaged applications. So it's a big movement away from packaged and towards companies becoming software organizations and becoming capable of building software, which of course is what these 7 disciplines that you have identified are all about.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to distinguish between where you put that software development effort, right? The software development effort needs to go into those things that create value for the customer, whether it's in creating agility inside the organization or by creating new digital experiences for the customer. But it doesn't mean that a company should go and write every app from scratch across the board for the entire organization. There's only a certain percentage of things that the organization does that differentiate and create value for the customer that are uniquely valuable to the customer compared to the competitors. And many of the disciplines inside an organization, sort of the business capabilities, are shared in common with many other organizations that don't differentiate the company. And you simply don't need to go and create custom software for those kind of things. Those sort of standard applications can be supported by off-the-shelf tools without any problem. And that allows you to focus on the 20-30% of the core of the business that creates value for the customer that absolutely should be tailored, should be world-class, because that's what differentiates the organization. And that's where IT can create enormous value for the business.
Eddie, a moment ago you mentioned culture, and I'd like to delve a little further into the question of culture. Nigel, your research showed there's a strong positive correlation between high-growth companies and companies that have a clear digital focus. Is there something in the culture of these organizations that's driving this?
Absolutely. There's definitely an innovation culture inside these companies, so there's sort of understanding that they need to be constantly trying to create these new ways of creating value for the customer. So it's always with a view of how is the customer getting value, what's the outcome the customer wants, and then how do we innovate to help drive that new experience, that new set of outcomes for the customer. So there's this very creative, innovative culture, and that can be applied internally as well. So how do we change our business operations in order to be able to do that more effectively? And alongside that, sort of you say, well, okay, people say, well, if you're building a digital culture, is that just an innovation culture? Not quite, right? There's a lot of other things that go around it. Understanding and becoming sort of a digital mindset becomes very important. But this sort of part of the innovation side of things is this toleration of failure, right? So most organizations don't tolerate failure very well. In fact, we sort of built this sort of performance management in many organizations to look at how well people complete tasks. And we measure people on that. And so the people that rise up in organizations are often very good at completing tasks and managing that process. And some of the most innovative people inside the organization are inherently not good at completing tasks, and they don't succeed very well in an organization that manages performance based on how well you complete tasks. So you have to look at a whole range of things to figure out, do we nurture innovation? Do we nurture creativity? Especially things like metrics, how you measure people, so that people who are more creative can succeed inside your organization. So those sort of the ability to look at those metrics, how you succeed, they all go into creating the right culture. But it all starts with the CEO understanding digital as a force of change inside the business. Does a CEO look at digital as simply a technology thing that he's got to manage spend down on and control, or is it a fundamental way of changing the business model, changing how you create value to the customer? How do you help the customer get to the outcome they value in a different way? If the CEO understands that, then that starts to put all of the culture change pieces in place, because fundamentally the culture is driven very much from the CEO, and not just what the CEO says, but how the CEO acts, how they measure, how they nurture the right kind of thinking inside the organization, and reward employees that are doing and demonstrating the right kind of things to improve the culture of the organization.
Eddie, I'm sure that all of our listeners want to have the right kind of culture for digital transformation, but I'm sure not everybody is really in the right place yet. What do you think laggards can do to catch up? In fact, is there still time to catch up?
Well, I think we're living in an incredibly interesting time where the world is transitioning to digital, and I think it is that big. It is a massive movement towards digital transformation which is occurring, and the pace of change is getting faster and faster. So I'm not surprised that our friends at Forrester have discovered this strong correlation between growth and digital focus or digital competency. And I think it's an interesting question. How do people work out where they are in terms of that competency? So, the findings of the survey, the 7 key digital disciplines, can be viewed almost as the calling cards of digital success, are incredibly illuminating. We have found also with our customers at Software AG that these disciplines provide a useful guide to where our customers are on their digital journeys. I won't list them all now, but whether it's understanding your ability to integrate the various systems in your organization, or managing dynamically the processes that control your business, or introducing decisioning based on real-time insights into events impacting your business. The ability to understand where you are across those disciplines is really, really important, whether you're a laggard or, in fact, whether you're a fully paid-up member of Club Digital.
Nigel, I'd like to go back over to you for a moment. You ask companies in different industries to prioritize their digital transformation goals. Are there any results that really jumped out at you or surprised you?
Well, they do vary a little bit by industry. So, you might be surprised to see regulatory compliance at the top of the retail industry. But if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? Credit card fraud's at an all-time high. There are major issues for retailers around PCI compliance, payment card industry compliance. And certainly in the USA, we're seeing a shift in towards chip and pin, which our friends in Europe are amazed that it's taken so long. But US is finally getting chip and pin cards, so that's changing a lot of the compliance requirements for retailers in the US. So there's a constant change of compliance going on in retail that is always going to be top of mind in retail. So it's not really surprising to see that one there if you think about what happens in the retail industry. But if you're outside of the retail industry, that probably does seem surprising. When you look at things like banking, right, so optimizing bank network communications was perhaps higher than some people might think. But that's, if you think about what's going on in the banking world, you have a lot of retail presence, a lot of high street banks with a large presence, and you're looking to try and digitize experiences with customers. You want to make sure you've got very strong communications to the retail banks, but at the same time, you're also trying to build these digital experiences for customers, and so online video streaming becomes more important as banks start adding in things like educational tools through video, etc. So communications networks becomes important for banking, and obviously speed of transactions is critical. And then, perhaps one of the most surprising would be in manufacturing, where you see this focused on digital customer experience at the top. And many people would think, well, most manufacturing is B2B, so, why is DCX at the top? And a lot of manufacturing is now looking at the opportunity to go direct to consumer or to create digital experiences for their customers as part of products. And so there's a radical shift going on in manufacturing that is going to be so much bigger than say, the consumer sector. So that, again, you can explain when you understand what's going on in these sectors, you can kind of understand why certain things are at the top versus a bit lower down. One of the ones that stood out also for me was in the government. I was actually surprised to see regulatory compliance relatively low down in the government sector, given the fact that, obviously the government sector is driven very much by compliance to changing legislation, etc. So there's some interesting nuances in the study, but overall they're explained by some of the differences in the industries going forward. But there's a lot of consistency as well in terms of what's important in these sectors to prepare for digital transformation.
Eddie, as you deal with customers from day to day, do you see a similar prioritization of goals?
Yeah, we see that there are different areas of focus across industries, but there is a broad thread that runs through it all, which is consistent. But in terms of the differences, I guess, in the consumer-focused industries, there's a much greater focus on the customer and the customer journey. But as Nigel mentioned there, we also see this beginning to come into the thinking of manufacturers. How can they design their products in light of the connected customer and the different usage patterns that enables? We see that in manufacturing and in utilities, there's also a heavy focus still on efficiency and automation. But, regardless of the industry, digital transformation is about simplification. It's about flexibility, it's about agility, and it's about speed. And for me, those are the goals, if you like, of digital transformation. And the 7 disciplines that Forrester have found in their survey, those are really the digital skills of organizations who we see to be achieving these goals. So whether it's customer experience management in banking, or point-of-sale initiatives in retail, or predictive maintenance in manufacturing or utilities, these are all uses of technology which are about making businesses run more smoothly and about adding value for customers. And one final point on this, because we're talking about a transformation, it's worth noting, and Nigel, you made this point earlier as well, that it's not achieved with a single initiative or a single application. It's achieved by a broad mobilization of the entire company. This calls for a technology platform which is capable of connecting and orchestrating all of the technology, people, processes within an organization so that they can work in a synchronized and coherent way. At Software AG, we designed our digital business platform to enable this kind of transformation to the state of being a digital business. So, the name Digital Business Platform, it's not that the platform is digital, it's that our customers who are using it are enabled to become digital. So that's the focus of what we're doing.
Nigel, you uncovered a correlation between the 7 disciplines of digital transformation and how developed a company's digital transformation strategy is. Perhaps you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, there's simply a correlation between the more disciplines that a company has, or the more maturity they have in these 7 disciplines, the more likely they are to have a mature strategy that looks at digital as a way of creating value for customers and creating the agility inside the organization. So there's sort of a corresponding if you're focused on digital in the right way, then you need to do these 7 disciplines. Or you could look at it saying if you do these 7 disciplines, you're more likely to be able to have a more strategic view of what digital means to the enterprise. So whichever way around you look at it, the correlation is strong. We can't necessarily show the causality at this point, but you definitely see this, very strong correlation. If you have a more comprehensive strategy, then the disciplines help focus on what's needed to change in terms of being able to deliver the strategy. So if you're thinking about creating new digital products or new digital services, then having these disciplines in place gives you a better bench to build off, or better capabilities, or what I would probably describe as helping to build your digital DNA in order to be able to grow into the execution of the strategy. So there's sort of this strong connection between what those 7 disciplines look at and other aspects that we examine in terms of digital transformation.
Eddie, over to you. As a practitioner who deals with customers every day, are you able to see these 7 disciplines at work in companies that actually are successfully leading the digital charge?
Absolutely. We're all in violent agreement that digital sophistication, let's say, is a key enabler of growth and an enabler of readiness to transform. I think that's the core finding of the study that Forrester have done. So these 7 disciplines give us a way, if you like, to measure digital sophistication. And speaking from experience, I certainly see these digital capabilities making a difference at our customers. One example is a large TV company which was able to reduce its truck rolls by 40% by looking at customer faults that were coming in so that they could establish where the problem was likely to be. So by analyzing that data and gaining visibility into the likely cause, they achieved a massive reduction in cost, an increase in customer satisfaction, and they also did some good for the environment. So digital transformation is good news all around.
Eddie, just one more question before we close. Is there a self-assessment that organizations can perform to see just how fit they are?
There is indeed. So at Software AG, we have built upon the work that Forrester have done in this survey. We really like this concept of the 7 disciplines of digital fitness, and so we have built a self-service assessment that our customers can use in order to gauge where they are on the digital journey. It's available at digital.softwareag.com. I believe it's also linked on the slide that you can see right now. So please pay us a visit, give it a go, and we'll look forward to speaking with you about the results. For those who do take the assessment, we'll also send you the research findings from Forrester and the report that Nigel has written.
Thanks very much, Eddie. That is all the time we have in this on-demand webcast. Sincere thanks to Nigel Fenwick, Vice President and Principal Analyst of Forrester Research, and to Eddie McDaid, Senior Vice President of Industry Solutions at Software AG. Thanks to both for sharing their insights on the best way to achieve fitness for digital transformation. For more information on this topic, please click on the green Resources icon on your screen. And thanks for joining us. For IDG and Software AG, I'm Stan Gibson.